website here is about hillside architecture. So I'm really focused on delivering a great product for clients on hillside homes. But I'm also focused on just educating just in general. Like let's get the message out here. How are we going to do this the right way? And
Yeah.
since meeting you, it's been like, wait a second, this guy's doing it right. So talk to me a little bit about that. So your company is called Craydl.
Yeah. So, and that's really kind of you to say. I just want to stop and acknowledge that and say thank you. That's because it's nice to get some validation from people who we really respect. So thank you. So Cradle, it's probably helpful if I tell you a little bit about my background. I went to school for architecture. I went to school for business management. And I've had this kind of weird career, but over the course of it, I've been a general contractor, I've been a designer, I've been a project manager, I've had to run procurement because, I'm basically the chief, what do they call it? The chief bottle washer and cook because I was essentially the developer. And, whoever owns the project normally has to pull all these disparate parts and services together. And I'm a little bit of an A-type personality, so I like to kind of really have a lot of visibility and understand what's going on. And this, the relationship between builder, architect, homeowner, and what I lovingly refer to as the rest of the village that makes an idea come to life. It takes over 100 different parties, and it's a lot of information to coordinate. And it just always sort of felt like when I was the one writing the checks, I needed to take personal responsibility for a lot of that information. And I also have this, I've had this background, before I was building and developing. And I guess at some points in my career, these two things were going on simultaneously. But I also have a background in capital markets and IT systems and software development. And so these two things have kind of come together because I'm looking at my knowledge in one space as potentially being the solution to my irritation in the other. And that's how Cradle has come to be.
Right, that's very interesting, and sometimes it does take kind of an outside look. So you were in the business, got out for a bit, came back in, and now you're using those insights you got.
Yeah,
In,
I've always been involved in real estate. It's just to varying degrees. And Cradle, when I first started it, now over 3 years ago, I initially thought it would be a design build firm where we would sort of have this technology backbone that provided transparency and controls and made the process understandable to all the stakeholders. And ultimately, after we did a bunch of research, we have deep expertise here in the Phoenix area from a construction standpoint. We have amazing builders out here with a lot of experience that have really gotten their stripes out here in the valley. Same thing with architects. There's a very deep and very, very well regarded architectural community here. I think the challenge that I saw was kind of bridging the gap, and not just the gap between architect and builder, but the informational gap between all the people that are providing information into a project, and then how that information gets produced and interpreted out in the field when things are getting constructed. So, I've been inside that tornado. Yeah.
nice, yeah, and I think to think very broadly of who's involved in a project, right? We think architect, we think owner, and we think builder, and that's three people, but that is very overgeneralized. And under the architect's umbrella, we have all kind of the engineering part of that. We have civil engineers, structural, all those disciplines that fall kind of on the design side, so the pre-construction side. Then you
Mhm.
have a builder who, just like you mentioned, we're not just talking one. It's not just one general contractor or one person working on the project. It's hundreds of subcontractors. And then there's an owner who oftentimes is not super knowledgeable of these things. So what I see a lot with Cradle, you are bridging that gap. You're helping owners, you're helping builders and architects, and you're kind of putting us all together in an arena and in an area where we could all have access to one. In your case, it's a model. So it's called building information model for
Mhm.
us, but also for you, you're very passionate about this information modeling in general. But what it does is it helps all of us, keeps us all on the same page, reduces errors, those kind of things. So that to me was very obvious when you first started speaking about it, that you are this kind of uh, through collaboration with your firm, you are this glue that kind of holds us together and hold us all accountable into one model, and say, hey, if something's not working, let's all refer back to this one thing. And now it's much easier to solve problems. There's no finger pointing, except for we're pointing now at this model.
That's
And
right.
now we could all talk. Yeah.
That's right. To say it another way, and this is going to sound really geeky, but what a builder gets when they're ready to put shovels in the ground is a bunch of unstructured information. And by that, I mean they receive construction documents, they receive engineering reports, they receive interior design specs, they receive selections. But any conflicts that exist between that normally aren't found out until they're out in the field. So that's the most basic advantage of doing everything in an information model, taking everyone's work, putting it into the model, and then reflecting it back to the provider, whether it's the civil person or the architect or the interior designer, and say, is this what you meant? Right? It gives them an opportunity to understand how their information is being interpreted and how it's being reflected in this model. And the important thing is that when something changes for someone, it has to change everywhere for everyone. And that is what good information management does. That's what having the information structured in a model does. And we can talk about all the wondrous things you can do when you start to aggregate that kind of information from an efficiency standpoint, on a go-forward basis. But by my estimate, whether you're an architect or or a builder or an interior designer, the amount of time that's wasted chasing information from other people in this process, only to find that that information is wrong or conflicts with somebody else's information, and then creates a bunch of rework, is where we lose a lot of credit. It's where we lose a lot of credibility. It's because of these unforced errors, that then don't get found out until real money is being spent in the field. And so what we're trying to do is bridge all the disparate parts using building information modeling to make sure that whoever is involved in the project and whoever's looking at the information in the project, that we're all one band, one sound, and reading from a unified version of the truth.
Yeah, no, and that's great. And so even, it could get super technical, but even just from the homeowner side, the client side, there's no more guesswork. Oh, I didn't know that that was going to look that way. Or I didn't know when you said here there's a counter here that it was actually a low counter, not a high counter. I had no idea. Now we could see everything in a 3D model. It's it's helps everyone, right? Helps architect, helps owner, helps builder. So yeah, so I mean, I could see, obviously we could see it fast why this would be of benefit to everyone involved. Owners, I think the biggest benefit would be one, there's just seeing the product before it's built. No more question marks, no more trying to figure out how to read a floor plan, what's a building section. Those things don't matter anymore. We don't need to get so technical. Here's a 3D view with the materials in there, what the interior designer spec. But then also from the cost estimating and budgeting standpoint. So this is another big one, right? A big question, of course, is how much is my project going to cost? And it's the hardest question to answer, especially right at the beginning when we have almost no information.
Yeah.
And then throughout the process, sometimes architect says, you know what, I think this will look really cool. But you know what, that's also going to cost about 75,000 more than we were expecting. So now something like a building information model could also carry with it, right?
Costing information,
Costing information.
systems information. Yes.
Okay, so that's awesome. It can reduce waste, right? We're not going to order too many too much panels of drywall, too many plywood sheets, things like that, because now we're pretty precise. But if we go back to even at the very beginning, you have something, since you're into all this information, that cost estimating will happen throughout the process. But what about right at the beginning?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's where we start. So we develop little technology widgets, for our customers to try and help drive this alignment early and often. And one of the things that we've developed is a budgeting calculator. So we look at the world and custom residential as being in one of four programs. Either it's a new home, it's an interior remodel only, it's an interior remodel with some engineering, or it's a remodel plus we're adding square footage. Those are the four basic programs. So you select your program, which is the equivalent of your calculator type. You answer about 60 questions with your customer, where we can discuss things like how much square footage we're building and what's the condition of the lot. Is there an existing house there? And what's your price quality mix? And let's start talking about specifics in the kitchen and the bathrooms and and what's going on the outside of the house, and what about roofing and cladding and doors and windows. And the idea is that it gives you this high level budget. It's not an estimate. And this is really important. And I share this with customers. It's not an estimate because we haven't created plans for anybody to estimate yet. But it will provide you with a line item by line item budget based on actuals from about 30 different builders who are, and what we're basically showing is what's the cost of an architect to do a house like this? What's the cost of a civil engineer to do something like this? What's the cost of framing and foundation and roofing based on the way that you've answered the questions? And we're not saying that you should spend that much money. We're just saying that's what other people have spent for similar types of projects, the way that you've answered the questions. And if that number is astoundingly high to you, well, we can't make wood cost less or concrete cost less, but we can change how we answer the questions. So maybe we're not doing 16-foot ceilings, maybe we're doing 10 or 12. Maybe we're not doing 6,000 feet, maybe we're doing 4,500. Maybe now's not the time to do the basement. So, but it gives us the ability to drive alignment from a budget and scope standpoint from the onset so that we can answer the most important questions for a homeowner. And in my very simple view of the world, there are four that matter. How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? What's it going to look like? And how's it going to perform? And this is designed to answer the how much and how long parts of, questions from the onset. So that we've got a good starting point to develop a program that everybody can rally behind.
Yeah, I love that. And I think extremely valuable tool. And for us, we'll talk to homeowners very early on. We'll do kind of preliminary analysis. We'll talk about budget, but a lot of the time was more kind of not a shoot from the hip, but from experience, if your house is pretty decent, it'll cost X amount per square foot, and that's kind of how we would guide them. But with this budget calculator, this thing is much more robust, and I know you keep it up to date, right, as far as information goes. So I think this is extremely valuable for homeowners when they're, especially right at the beginning, just starting. Talk to us too a little bit now. Price of lumber, all these things um, those are fixed basically, and they could change over time. But how does it, for budgeting for a hillside home, how would that be different, let's say, than a regular home? Where kind of are the differences?
Yeah, I mean, there's questions in there about the lot condition. So the first question it's going to ask is, is this on the side of a mountain? Which now starts to impact things like grading and drainage. And when we take the lot size, it also contemplates the lot size and sort of calculating what would a reasonable driveway space look like, and what's the cost of building that driveway. It also asks questions like, are there retention needs? And if so, approximately how many lineal feet of retention wall are we going to need, so that we can start factoring that in there as well. So it's designed to do a pretty good job. It's not perfect. What I tell people is it's not perfect. It's designed to get you within 10% of where your actual should land, assuming a couple of things: that pricing stays relatively stable, of course, and assuming that what gets designed follows the requirements and the way that they answer the questions. Obviously, if we go through the questions and we propose a 4,500 square foot house, but they wind up designing 6,000 feet, that's going to adversely impact the price. And so as part of our program management, one of the first things we do after we complete floor plan and elevation design concepting. So, meaning we have an architect, that's part of the program. They complete their floor plan and elevations and massing. And once the customer approves that, the very next thing we do is go back to the calculator and say, okay, now that we've designed something, would we have answered these questions any differently? And if the answer is yes, then what would the new answers be, and how would that impact the budget? That is what we consider to be sort of the key, the gating activity to determine, okay, do we then go proceed and actually get the interior designer started and get all the engineering consultants started. So that's a really important critical piece of the overall program.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's great. And I didn't have a budgeting kind of tool before other than, past experience, that kind of thing. So having something kind of at our disposal, and especially for homeowners, I think that's the biggest one where the obvious question is always, well, how much does it cost? And the answer is always, well, I don't know. But now we have something that we could refer to. So, and we'll have a link to this on the website to go to Craydl site and set it up a budgeting calculator
Mm-hmm.
kind of session with Adam type deal. And I think it's just great. It gives a starting point. People want a number, and it's so hard as architects to just give a number. But here we are now, 60 well thought out questions, includes conditions of law, it includes a bunch of information. So this is great.
Yeah, it's interesting because even today I was introduced to a builder who was telling me that he builds for $350 a square foot. And my answer to him was, well, what's in that number? Is it all hard costs? Is it soft? And by the way, it started at 225 a foot. And then I was asking questions like, well, what about the dirt work? What about the grading? What about getting, what about connecting to utility services and and access fees and road work that you're going to have to do. And of course he's like, oh, well, it doesn't include that. Well, it doesn't include that. Well, it doesn't include that. And so, the point is that taking an all-encompassing look just drives better outcomes. It's better to find out early that when I sit down with a homeowner for the first time and we get to a reasonable number, to a number and a scope that we both feel good about as a starting point for the program. That's when I explain to them that, I remind them that budgeting activity and estimating activity are two different things. And that this is simply a budgeting activity. And the analogy that I give them is a bag of groceries. I explain it's the equivalent of you coming to me and saying, Adam, we're hosting a dinner party on Friday night. You're going to cater it. What are the groceries going to cost? And my answer to you is, I have no idea. Let me ask you a few questions first. So by going through this calculator, I now understand that you plan on having 10 people over for dinner, and including yourself and your wife. It's now going to be a total of 12 people, and we're going to serve some fish and risotto and white wine and apple pie for dinner. I can tell you that that bag of groceries is going to cost about $800 to $1,000. What I don't know is the day of the dinner, are you going to say, hey, great news, my in-laws are in town with their friends and we have 4 more people? And I know you were thinking about making orange roughy, but my in-laws and everybody here is really looking for surf and turf and oysters, and you get the idea. And so the point is that they can order more expensive things, less expensive things, but at least they'll have an opportunity to intervene and have realistic budgets in mind for those cost categories, and decide how and where they want to press financially. So that's the whole idea behind it. It's to create a clean and mutually understood starting point.
Yeah, I know it's great, and the amount of detail is also is perfect. So the fact that there's about 60 questions, it's more than, oh, you want to choose middle of the road finishes and you're going to be about 2,500 square foot house. Okay, it's going to be $400 a square foot. No, now we're asking the right questions, and then we could always check against what we initially said. And because of that information modeling, so you have that information from the beginning, the budgeting, then you have a cost estimate as time goes on throughout the design, and we're always gauging against that budgeting
That's right.
calculator.
That's
And
right.
so and now also homeowners we sometimes take for granted as architects or even and builders too, how much the homeowner knows or the client may know, and like you were saying before too, what's included in the price. In my head, I'm not thinking, just pavers on the outside all the time. I'm thinking, kind of structure, house. So the amount of detail that we need in that estimate, and with all those items broken down, it gives the homeowner an idea of how much really is involved in here and what we're talking about.
I
So
think you bring up, yeah, I think you bring up a great point, Nicholas. The other really important thing about the calculator, I think, is that it gives you the ability to educate the customer. So even, you're leaving them with a very detailed budget that I think often will provide a lot more detail than what they might get from other folks. And the purpose of that is that they can understand the impact that their decisions have on cost. They can understand what they can control, what they can't control, and I think that those are important. The other thing is that when we're going through the individual cost categories, you have no idea how many times we'll go, God, floor prep, I never thought about that. Fire suppression, I never thought about that. Dirt import, I never thought about that. They're thinking, lumber costs are down, let's go build a house. But the reality is there's literally 100 cost categories that go into building a house. And we've done our best to map the output, the cost categories to tools like Builder Trend or Co-Construct, or tools that builders are accustomed to using, and how they think about their cost categories within their project P&Ls. So that it's universally understood.
Nice, nice, nice. I think that's great. Yeah. This all been wonderful, and I find I'm happy we met each other.
Me
Craydl,
too.
yeah.
You've been a great partner. We really appreciate it. We're working on some really cool stuff together. It's been great.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing those projects come to life, um, and also how people are reacting to your cost estimator through the process. It's great for me just seeing it, and I'm glad that people have a place to start with that budget estimator. That's a great tool. So kudos. And then it's
Thank you.
all about it's your IT background there, your computer mind entering into the architecture and building world. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We've got big dreams, big ideas, and a few really great partners and clients that are creating fertile ground for us. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I love it.
Cool.
Yeah.
How's that?
Amazing.
Cool.
Okay, so what I'm thinking of doing is one will have the